is absolutely certain we are going. Now, why not try and go on your own terms?
I think we all congratulate ourselves and we say we're great at death. No, we're not. We're great at dealing with somebody else's death. It's how you deal with your own, I suppose, is the trick.
Have you ever thought about the way you want to go? Given that death is the only thing guaranteed to happen to each one of us, why is it not something we think about more? The manner of your own death may not be of your choosing, but your death preparations can be. Since 2009, the Irish Hospice Foundation holds an annual forum for end-of-life care. This resulted in a national recognition of the importance of planning ahead. So the Think Ahead initiative was created to help citizens of Ireland bring up the topic about death with their family. The Think Ahead forum includes areas for people to list pertinent information in the event of an emergency to be provided to EMS and hospitals. It then goes on to help people decide what their wishes are regarding care preferences at the end of their life, planning a will or power of attorney, listing financial information for families to access after they have died, and describe their plans for funeral and burial arrangements. You must be thinking, wow, Ireland is really ahead of their time, but not so much. They have not yet caught up to the rest of the world with regards to the physician-assisted death and euthanasia debate. In Ireland, assisting another person to end their life is considered a criminal offense that carries a 14-year prison sentence. There is no constitutional right to die or to help someone else do so. In 2009, the Director of Public Prosecutions issued guidelines recommending that a person assisting another in committing suicide should not be prosecuted. However, relatives actively helping an individual to die would not be covered by the guidelines, and individuals could still be expected to be charged with murder or manslaughter. Ireland should really be taking another look at their laws, especially since there is a lot of debate on this topic.
See, if anybody else, anywhere else in the world dies, that's the end of it, they're dead. But in Ireland, when somebody dies, we lay them out and watch them for a couple of days. It's called a wake. And it's a party, it's a send-off. And the fellow's laid out on the table. And it's drinking and dancing and all the food you can eat. And all your friends come from all over the place. And they all stand around the wake table looking at you with a glass in their hands and they say, here's to your health.
The term Irish wake refers to the tradition where mourners keep watch over their dead until they're buried. The origin of the Irish wake is not completely clear. However, there are two main beliefs about how this custom began. The first theory is centered around the history of lead poisoning in the Irish from drinking out of pewter mugs. The lead poisoning would cause a temporary catatonic state that mimicked the signs of death. For this reason, they began watching the deceased until burial to ensure the person was actually dead and not in this catatonic state. The other theory is related to the strong Irish belief in the afterlife and that death symbolizes moving on to a better life and thus is cause for a celebration. Whether people choose to believe in one theory or another, or a combination of both, the Irish wake is considered a celebration of life, both the life of the deceased and the lives of those left behind. While mourning the loss of their loved one, those left behind are reminded of how short life is and celebrate the fact that they still have their life left to live. The traditional Irish wake is held in the home of either the deceased or a close family member. The house is prepared to certain specifications to suit Irish superstitions that will be discussed later in this video. The wake itself lasts about 1 to 2 days, during which family, friends, and members of the community visit to pay their respects. In Ireland, the wake is a representation of the strength of the community, as it brings together the community members to help those affected by the loss. Part of the purpose of the wake is to keep watch over the deceased's body until burial. The family members each take shifts watching over the body during this time. The male family members or close friends often offer to watch over the body during the late hours so that the immediate family can get some rest. When a guest arrives at the wake, it's customary for them to greet the family members and offer their condolences first, and then move to where the body of the deceased is laid out. Traditionally, a prayer will be said when originally greeting the body, and some may choose to sprinkle holy water. The body is most often prepared through the embalming process, and is then dressed in white clothing with a rosary wrapped around their hands. and a cross placed either in their hands or around their neck as a necklace. Keening is the term used to describe crying and wailing out of grief from the loss of a loved one. The Irish believe that this should not begin until the body is laid out, or else it will invoke evil spirits that will take the deceased spirit. However, once the body is laid out, it is fully acceptable to wail and cry. Some may even hire female keeners that wail and cry and recite poetry during the wake. The celebration aspect of the wake usually includes music, dancing, telling stories, laughing, playing games, lots of food and alcohol, especially whiskey, and smoking tobacco. The tradition of smoking tobacco during the wake was originally started from the belief that the smoke would keep the evil spirits from finding the deceased. Many of these traditions are still carried out among the more rural populations in Ireland. However, some of these traditions are no longer appropriate or feasible in the modern time. For example, some either do not have the room in their house or the desire to be able to keep their deceased loved one in their home for the wake. In the more urban areas, people have shifted towards having the wake in a funeral home. The general idea of the wake has also changed and is often now a celebration carried out after the burial process, either in the home of a family member or in a bar or restaurant. The following video is an example of a more modern take on the traditional wake that takes place after the cremation.
Well, as Jerry would say, let's get this party started. Jerry Kennedy did not want a lot of words. He preferred music. He was a unique young man, as you can see by the urn he had designed by the love of his life, his wife, Holly. His life may be over for now, but we can still hear it. He lives in us forever in our hearts, like his favorite song.
Got on a lucky one, came in like 10 to 1. I've got a feeling this year's for me and you. So happy Christmas, I love you, baby. I can see a better time when all our dreams come true. You're a bum, you're a punk, you're an old slut and juggler, and they're almost dead on a dripping night bed.
You scumbag, you maggot, cheap, cheap, lousy faggots. Happy Christmas, you ass, I pray God it's our last. The boys of the NYPD choir still singing Galway Brave, and the bells are ringing out for Christmas Day.
Good to see you. Oh, good to hold you.
And the bells are ringing out for
Hello, Jerry.
Have you ever gone to a funeral and seen candles, or seen people grabbing at the hands of a corpse, or even seen picture frames face down instead of the traditional broadcast your life in a slideshow? Well, the reason you may or may not have encountered these events is due to the traditions that your family and friends practice. The Irish are known for their many traditions and superstitions. For those of you not aware of what superstitions are, they are widely held out but unjustified beliefs in the supernatural causation, leading to a certain consequence of an action or event or practice based on a belief. I'm sure you've heard of step in a crack and you'll break your mother's back, or no new shoes on a table because you'll be welcoming in unwanted guests. Leave through the same door you came through, or else they'll bring you misfortune. And these are just a few of the Irish traditions I, as well as many others, have grown up with. However, there are even more superstitions specifically pertaining to death. There are many different events that can happen that can impede doom on an individual and give them omens of death. Here are just a few of the superstitions regarding death, and pay attention, they may even tell you some things to avoid in order to lengthen your life. If you see a magpie greet you as you open your front door for the paper, death is coming for you or someone in the house. One may think that at night you're able to have a peaceful sleep and forget about your worries in the world. However, this is not the case. If you are having a dream about a baby being born, that is a sign that someone you know is going to die. Even worse, if you see yourself in your dream, that's telling you that your death is coming up. I don't know how many of you walk through graveyards at night, but this may make you want to steer clear of them for a bit. Because if you happen to be walking through a graveyard at night with your friends and trip and fall, it's bad luck. If you end up on the ground, well, you have a death sentence and most likely will be dead by the end of the year. That being said, if you're in a graveyard for a funeral, make sure not to wear new clothes because this will likely bring misfortune to you. Now at the actual funeral, if you're really sick, you may want to grab the deceased's hand as it is known to cure all diseases, as well as the candles that are burning. So safe to say, if you ever get sick, show up at an Irish funeral and it may be more beneficial than going to the hospital depending on your beliefs. In North America, traditionally funerals reflect someone's life, so you see pictures of the deceased and their family and friends smiling everywhere. However, this is not the case with the Irish. All those pictures are face down or covered. There are to be no pictures of the deceased shown, as their spirit may be among one of those pictures and possess one of the family members or friends. You may look at a clock at an Irish funeral and say to yourself, I swear it's been 7 p.m. the whole time I've been here. Well, yes, it has been. The clock gets stopped when someone dies to confuse the devil. This allows time for the soul to make its way to heaven. Another superstition regarding death is to cover all mirrors. You want to have all mirrors covered because if they are not, the soul of the person who died may get trapped inside. After the funeral has taken place in the Irish homes, the dead are carried out feet first. It is believed that if the head is brought out first, there is a chance that the spirit may look at another member of the family and follow them. The Irish believe that when one dies, it is best to bring the body back to the homeland, and here is an old wives' tale as to why. A young girl happened to die of a fever while away on a visit to some friends, and her father thought that it was safer to not bring her home but to have her buried at the nearest churchyard. However, a few nights after his return home, he was awakened by a mournful wail at the window and heard a voice cry, I am alone, I am alone, I am alone. Then the father knew well what this had meant. He prayed that the spirit of his child rest until morning. And then, as the day broke, he arose and set off for the strange burial ground. He then drew the coffin from the earth and had it carried all the way back to Cork from Mayo. After he had laid his daughter in the old graveyard beside friends and family, the spirit of his daughter was at rest, and the wailing had never been heard again. With all this said, there is a few things that you may want to take into mind before you speed up your own dying process.
What happens after you die? It's the oldest question alive, and nobody alive will ever be able to tell you what happens. Nobody will ever know the answer to it, and if they're telling you they know the answer to it, are they really telling you the truth? Of course, people are very conscious about what happens to them after death. Do they go to heaven? Do they go to hell? Or is there some sort of afterlife? And so they're encouraged very much to think about death because it might come suddenly to them. Of course, people are going to think of a funeral because there's a lot of practicality to it and there's a direction to it, and it requires other people to make it happen rather than yourself. And of course, spiritual and religion to people can be very comforting for them with death. I know when I was interviewing my grandmother for the interview for this class, she was very comforted by death because she was 100% sure she was going to heaven. And for her, she was going to see her mother and her father and her grandparents, and it was a place of full peace, and she was able to do whatever she wanted when she was there. So for her, she had no fear of death whatsoever. In the country of Ireland, Dolores Wellen is a very looked up to person as she is a guide for Celtic spirituality. When she speaks of Celtic traditions, she says that she's referring to the indigenous traditions of the country, which is to do with the megalithic, Celtic, and Christian traditions. Her work focuses on enabling people to find wellness and hopefulness and find a relationship within the earth. She says that if they follow the Celtic calendar throughout the year, and they did right all throughout their life, they will die during the spring period, which is a time of rebirth. And in Irish tradition, instead of dying, they think of it as a process of rebirth. And many people look up to Dolores Welland and are very inspired by and comforted by the fact that there's an afterlife after death. One of the most enduring images of death is the graveyard. The cemetery at Glasnevin is the largest non-denominated graveyard in Ireland, with over 1.5 million burials to date. The chief executive of Glasnevin Cemetery is George McCullough, and he says that a lot of people are planning ahead for their burials. He says that many families plan ahead by trying to get disposable coffins so that they can bury their family members on top of each other for centuries to come. And he says that there's about 50% burials and about 50% cremations, with a little bit more being cremations as it is a little bit cheaper and it is becoming the norm nowadays to do cremations. He says that this shows that we may not talk about death openly, but we definitely are thinking about it and we definitely are planning for it. The stonemason is a key trade in Ireland, and it is a very, very sought after craftsmanship. However, it only is traded on and passed on through the family. A stonemason in Ireland is when they have someone who can carve names and dates into the stone rather than computers doing it. And as much as people hope for that, it is becoming less nowadays as computers are taking over. In the medieval period, death was a very public occasion. Nowadays, it's more friends and family who show up, but in the medieval period, everyone from the city would come and everyone would celebrate. It would be a celebration of life, and people would come and they would support the family and they would be there for them. So who is the judge of a good death? Ideally, it is the person who just died, but there's no way of communicating with them anymore. Is the manner of your own death your choosing? No. But how you prepare for your death, that is of your own choosing. Of course, death is an extremely complex issue with so many complexities and experiences at least no one living can tell us about. While we may find good when we give someone a nice send-off at a good funeral, good burial, giving support to the family, maybe it's time to face up to our own mortality. Death may be our final tip-off, but it doesn't have to be. We can make plans, and we can start those conversations with our loved ones about what we want in our lives and engage with the inevitable finally. So let's face it. We always say you only live once, but in truth, you only die once as well. So let's do it right.